There's a GTR out there worth more than 10 Bugatti Chirons combined. It's not street legal, it was never sold, and Nissan only built one. But before we get there, you need to understand what makes a GTR truly rare, because production numbers don't tell the whole story. Some were banned from racing, others were too expensive to finish, and a few were deliberately destroyed. Number 15, the R33 GTR LM Limited, Championship Blue. That's the only color you could get. No options, no alternatives. Just one shade that commemorated Nissan's dominance at Le Mans. In 1996, Nissan had just proven the R33 GTR LM could compete with the world's best endurance racing machines. To celebrate that achievement and bring a piece of racing heritage to the streets, they released the LM Limited. Most people think this is the rarest GTR ever made. They're wrong, but we'll get to that. 188 units rolled off the production line. 86 were based on the standard R33, 102 built on the V-spec platform. Every single one packed the RB26, pushing around 320 horsepower to all four wheels through Nissan's legendary Atessa all-wheel drive system. But here's the thing, 188 cars is actually generous compared to what's coming on this list. The LM Limited was just Nissan testing the waters, seeing if enthusiasts would pay premium prices for racing-inspired street cars. What they learned from this experiment would lead to decisions that make the LM Limited look like a mass production vehicle. This was just the beginning. Number 14, the R32 GTR NISMO 1990. 1 year after the R32 GTR came back from the dead and reminded the world why Godzilla earned its nickname, Nismo decided the regular version wasn't enough. They had a problem to solve. The BMW E30 M3 and Ford Sierra RS 500 were dominating FIA Group A racing, and Nissan needed something that could not only compete but absolutely obliterate the competition. So they stripped it down, removed everything that didn't make the car faster, added air vents in critical locations to keep temperatures manageable during extended track sessions, extended the rear end, and slapped on aggressive spoilers designed specifically to generate downforce at speed. The attention to detail was obsessive. The RB26 was tuned to an official rating of 276 horsepower, thanks to Japan's gentleman's agreement that prevented manufacturers from advertising more than that figure. But everyone in the industry knew that was corporate fiction. Real output? Around 360 horsepower. Nissan wasn't just bending the rules, they were rewriting them. 560 units were built in total, 500 to meet FIA homologation requirements, 60 reserved exclusively for racing teams, never registered for street use, built purely to dominate tracks around the world. The street versions were weapons that embarrassed supercars twice their price. The race versions were undefeated monsters that rewrote record books. But Nissan was just getting warmed up. Number 13, the R34 GTR M-Spec Nür 2001. The final year of R34 production, and Nissan knew they were closing a chapter in automotive history. They wanted to send the R34 generation off with something that balanced raw performance with genuine luxury. The M-Spec was their answer, a more refined version of the V-Spec with the Nürburgring package added for good measure. The M came from chief engineer Kazutoshi Mizuno, the man responsible for making the GTR what it became. The Nür came from the Nürburgring itself, the green hell, where manufacturers prove their cars can handle the most punishing circuit on Earth. Under the hood sat an N1-inspired RB26 producing 316 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. These weren't the inflated gentleman's agreement numbers. These were real, honest figures that Nissan could finally advertise without pretending. The engine was built with precision that bordered on obsessive, each component selected for reliability and performance. Only 285 were made, and here's where it gets interesting. 144 of those were finished in Millennium Jade, a color so distinct and so perfectly executed that it became legendary on its own. The paint seems to shift depending on light and angle, green one moment, gold the next, creating an effect that cameras struggle to capture. Most people assume the V-Spec Nur is rarer. They search for it, they talk about it, they're wrong again. The M-Spec Nur is the actual unicorn, the car that combines luxury with performance in a way Nissan never attempted before or since. Number 12, the R35 GTR SpecV 2009. 2 years after the R35 debuted and fundamentally changed what people expected from a GTR, Nissan wanted to prove they could push even harder. The standard R35 already embarrassed supercars that cost 3 times as much. The Spec V was Nissan's statement that they weren't satisfied with good enough. Carbon Recaro bucket seats replaced the standard chairs. Rear seats were completely removed, sending a clear message: this wasn't a Grand Tourer anymore. This was a weapon. Interestingly, they kept the navigation system and Bose audio, which seems counterintuitive for a car marketed as a weight reduction special. Critics pointed this out immediately, but Nissan still managed to cut 132 pounds from the curb weight, dropping it to 3,700 pounds and making it one of the lightest R35s ever built. The 3.8-liter VR38 V6 still produced 480 horsepower, matching the standard GT-R's output exactly. On paper, it looked like Nissan just removed seats and called it special, but the weight savings transformed how the car felt. Acceleration was sharper, handling was more responsive, braking distances shortened, every input felt more immediate, more connected. 110 units total, 5 exterior colors available, but Ultimate Black Opal stands out as one of the most haunting, dramatic finishes Nissan ever offered. The paint is so deep it looks like it absorbs light, creating an almost supernatural darkness that made the Spec V look like it belonged in a different dimension. But this is where the list starts getting truly expensive, where collectors begin paying premiums that defy logic. Number 11, the R35 GTR T-Spec 2021. Nissan looked at their GTR lineup and decided the premium trim wasn't premium enough. There needed to be something above it, something that existed purely for people who wanted exclusivity and were willing to pay for it. The T-Spec debuted as a special edition that sat above everything else in the hierarchy. 2 paint options, Midnight Purple 3 and Millennium Jade. Both colors carried deep significance in GTR history, callbacks to iconic finishes that defined previous generations. Widened track edition fenders gave it a more aggressive stance. Gold rays forged wheels caught light in ways that made the car impossible to ignore. A carbon fiber rear wing completed the exterior transformation. The VR38 produced 565 horsepower, pushing the T-Spec from 0 to 60 in just 2.9 seconds. Performance that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier was now standard equipment. 100 units worldwide, 50 allocated specifically to the US market, ensuring American collectors had access to something genuinely exclusive. Those Midnight Purple 3 examples? They're already selling for double their original asking price, and that's if you can find one for sale. The problem isn't affording a T-Spec, the problem is finding an owner willing to part with one. Number 10, the Skyline GTR 40th Anniversary Edition, 1997 Tokyo Motor Show. Nissan and Autech stood on stage with something that made the audience question whether they were serious. They wanted to celebrate 40 years of the Skyline nameplate, and they decided to do it by building something that shouldn't exist, the first 4-door GTR since the legendary 1969 Hakosuka. The Hakosuka sedan is one of the most revered cars in Japanese automotive history. Attempting to recreate that magic 28 years later was either brilliant or insane, possibly both. Autech took the 4-door R33 Skyline, a perfectly respectable sedan that nobody considered exciting, and transformed it into a legitimate GTR. The full treatment, RB26 engine producing proper GTR power, 5-speed manual transmission for those who wanted complete control. Nissan's Atessa all-wheel drive system to put that power down effectively. Rear bucket seats that reminded passengers this wasn't a normal sedan. Signature flared rear fenders that gave it an unmistakable GTR silhouette. Production began in January 1998, 416 units total, 4 available colors, Sonic Silver, Midnight Purple, Dark Pearl Gray, and White. Each one cost significantly more than a standard GTR, and people paid without hesitation. It was a sedan. It was a GTR. It shouldn't have worked. The proportions were wrong. The concept seemed confused. But it did work, and it worked beautifully, creating one of the most unique GTRs ever produced. Number 9, the R32 GTR N1 V-spec 2, 1991. The R32 had already dominated Group A racing so thoroughly that competitors were demanding rule changes. Nissan needed something new, a homologation special built specifically for Japan's N1 racing series, the direct predecessor to what would eventually become Super GT. They couldn't just modify a standard GTR, they needed to build something from the ground up. The N1 was based on the GTR NISMO released a year earlier, taking that already stripped platform and pushing it even further. 3 variants emerged: Standard, V-Spec, and V-Spec 2. Every single one was finished exclusively in crystal white. No exceptions, no special orders. White was the only option, creating a uniform appearance that emphasized the car's racing purpose. Nismo front bumper and hood, aggressive weight reduction that removed anything not essential to going fast. The car was built to meet racing regulations, not comfort standards. The V-Spec 2 arrived in 1994 with one key difference from the earlier V-Spec: wider OEM tires. That's it. Everything else remained identical. Same engine, same suspension, same interior, just wider rubber. The RB26 received steel turbochargers specifically chosen for improved durability during extended track sessions. Reliability was paramount. These cars needed to survive races, not just qualify for them. 245 total N1 cars were built across all variants. The V-Spec 2, 63 units, just one fewer than the regular V-Spec, making it the rarest N1 variant by a single car. Finding one today is nearly impossible. Most are either in private collections or destroyed on track decades ago. Number 8, the Kenmary GTR 1972 Tokyo Motor Show. Nissan unveiled the successor to the legendary Hakosuka GT-R, the car that had dominated Japanese racing and created the GT-R mythology. Expectations were impossibly high. The pressure was immense. They called it the Skyline 2000 GT-R. Everyone else called it the Kenmary, named after Ken and Mary, the fictional couple from Nissan's advertising campaign that dominated Japanese television and became part of popular culture. The design was more muscular than its predecessor, with cleaner lines and a more aggressive stance, longer wheelbase, wider front and rear tracks to improve stability and handling. The proportions were perfect, creating what many consider the most beautiful GTR ever built. Under the hood sat the S20 engine inherited from the Hakosuka. 157 horsepower, 130 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 62 miles per hour in 8.9 seconds. Respectable numbers for 1972. Then October 1973 arrived. The global oil crisis hit like a bomb. Oil prices quadrupled overnight. Governments imposed strict fuel economy regulations. High-performance cars became politically incorrect practically overnight. Nissan didn't just slow down Kenmary production. They killed it completely. 197 units. That's all that exists in the entire world, but it gets worse. Nissan also abandoned their entire racing program. The Kenmary never competed professionally. It never proved itself on track. It exists in this strange limbo, a GTR that never got to be a GTR, killed by economic forces beyond anyone's control. The Kenmary is the Phantom GTR, the Ghost, the rarest racing-oriented GTR in 55 years of history, and despite its significance, most people have never even heard of it. Number 7, the Nismo 400R, 1997. Final year of the R33 generation, a car that always existed in the shadow of the legendary R32 and the anticipation of the upcoming R34. Nissan had just conquered Le Mans, proving the R33 platform was capable of competing with purpose-built racing machines. Nismo wanted to commemorate that achievement with something unrepeatable, something that would cement the R33's legacy forever. They called it the 400R. Every single one was hand-built by Nismo technicians who treated each car like a work of art. Engine upgrades that pushed boundaries, chassis reinforcement in critical stress points, complete aerodynamic overhaul with components designed in wind tunnels. This wasn't a modified GTR, this was a completely re-engineered machine. At the center of everything sat the RBX GT2 engine, a 2.8-liter twin-turbo masterpiece built by Reineck that produced exactly what its name promised: 400 horsepower, 346 pound-feet of torque, 0 to 60 miles per hour in approximately 4 seconds. Performance that rivaled supercars costing 5 times as much. The engine note was intoxicating, a mechanical symphony that enthusiasts still talk about decades later. Nismo originally planned to build 100 units. They had customers lined up, deposits were paid, then reality intervened. Development costs spiraled out of control. Each car took too long to build. Profitability evaporated. By 1998, only 44 were completed, and Nismo made the difficult decision to end production. Each one cost more than most people's houses at the time. Today, they're worth significantly more, with values climbing every year as collectors realize what they missed. Number 6, the R34 GTR R-Tune. Around the year 2000, Nismo offered something that seemed almost insulting: the R-Tune package. It cost more than half the price of the base GTR. People looked at the price sheet and questioned Nismo's sanity. Then they drove one. Suddenly the price made perfect sense. The R-Tune wasn't a simple bolt-on package. This was a comprehensive transformation covering every aspect of the car. Suspension tuning that changed how the car communicated with the driver. Aerodynamic enhancements that improved stability at speed, mechanical refinements that transformed the Skyline from an exceptional sports car into a legitimate street-legal race car. The centerpiece was the R1 engine, and this is where things get interesting. Nismo only built just over 70 examples of this highly tuned inline 6 based on the reinforced RBN1 architecture that was already overbuilt for extreme use. In R-Tune specification, the RB26 received extensive internal upgrades, forged pistons, upgraded turbochargers, enhanced fuel delivery, improved cooling systems. Output climbed to approximately 444 horsepower, a figure that doesn't sound massive today but represented the bleeding edge of what could be achieved reliably from that displacement in 2000. Only around 25 R34s received the complete R-Tune conversion. Most people bought individual components, some upgraded just the suspension, others focused on aerodynamics, but only 25 committed to the full transformation, and those cars are nearly as valuable as the legendary Z-Tune. Nearly as elusive, nearly as sought after, and almost nobody talks about them, which makes them one of the best kept secrets in GTR history. Number 5. The Nismo Z-Tune 2002. Nissan was about to close the R34 era forever, ending a generation that many consider the greatest GTR ever built. Nismo had one last idea, something ambitious and possibly insane. They called it the Z-Tune, but they didn't actually build it until 2003, timing the release perfectly with Nismo's 20th anniversary celebration. Here's where the story gets interesting. Nismo didn't start with new cars sitting in a warehouse. They went hunting for used V-spec 2 models, cars that had already been driven, already broken in, already proven. Each candidate needed fewer than 30,000 kilometers on the odometer. The cars had to be clean, well maintained, no accidents, no abuse. Only 12 were purchased outright through normal channels. The remaining cars were donated by owners who understood they were participating in something historic. Every single car was completely stripped down to the bare chassis. Everything removed, everything examined, everything rebuilt from scratch. New wiring, new seals, new bushings. The Z-Tune wasn't a modified GTR. It was a reborn GTR, transformed by Nismo's most experienced technicians into something that transcended the original design. The plan was 20 units. Reality delivered 19, including 2 prototype vehicles used for development and testing. Z-Tune silver paint was the only option, a custom color mixed specifically for this project. The finish was exclusive, non-negotiable, reserved only for these machines. You couldn't order Z-Tune silver on any other car. It existed solely for this purpose. Values today? We're talking legitimate 7-figure territory. But even if you have the money, finding one for sale is nearly impossible. Most owners view them as museum pieces, investments that will only appreciate. The Z-Tune represents the absolute peak of what Nismo could achieve with the R34 platform. But somehow, incredibly, the Z-Tune isn't even top 3 on this list. Number 4, the Nismo S-Tune. While the entire world obsessed over the Z-Tune's racing pedigree and track capabilities, Nismo quietly built something else in the background. The S-Tune, conceived as a road-focused alternative for people who actually wanted to drive their GTR daily without destroying it on track or emptying their bank account on maintenance. The Nismo Spec V engine produced 450 horsepower and 325 pound-feet of torque, figures that delivered genuine supercar performance while maintaining reliability for street use. This wasn't a detuned Z-Tune. This was a completely different philosophy, optimized for real-world driving conditions rather than lap times. The upgraded chassis received a bespoke get-reg attack suspension setup that delivered stability most dedicated racing cars would envy. Nismo engineers spent months tuning the damping rates, spring rates, and anti-roll bar settings to create something that could handle aggressive canyon driving while still being comfortable enough for daily commutes. Aerodynamic components were subtle but functional. Unique front bumper with improved airflows, side skirts that managed underbody pressure, adjustable carbon fiber rear wing that could be configured for different driving conditions. Every piece served a purpose beyond aesthetics. The details revealed Nismo's obsessive attention to craft. Nismo aluminum fuel cap, titanium shift knob that felt perfect in hand, upgraded multifunction display with additional data points, branded floor mats with S-Tune logos. These weren't just badges slapped on for marketing. These were carefully considered components that elevated the ownership experience. Only 14 examples were completed. The S-Tune is one of the rarest R34 Skylines ever built, and it's the one that collectors genuinely regret not buying when they had the chance. Values have climbed steadily as people realize what they missed. A street-optimized GTR that combined 90% of the Z-Tune's performance with actually usable daily driving characteristics. Number 3, the Italdesign GTR50 2018. Two simultaneous 50th anniversaries, Italdesign's founding, and the GT-R nameplate. Nissan and Italdesign decided to celebrate by creating something that defied conventional automotive logic. They called it the GTR50. The unveiling happened at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, where it stopped conversations and caused crowds to form. It was conceived as a one-off design exercise, a show car that would demonstrate what was possible when designers were freed from production constraints. A rolling sculpture, a concept that would never see roads. Then Italdesign's phones started ringing. Collectors wanted one. Wealthy enthusiasts were calling with blank checks. The demand was overwhelming. The foundation was a 2017 GT-R NISMO, already one of the most capable cars Nissan had ever built. Then Italdesign completely stripped the original body and replaced it with bespoke handcrafted panels. Every surface was reshaped. The roofline dropped by 2 inches, creating a lower, more aggressive profile that fundamentally changed the car's proportions. Power came from a heavily upgraded 3.8-liter twin-turbo V6 using GT3-derived turbochargers that had proven themselves in professional racing. 710 horsepower, 585 pound-feet of torque. Performance that put it in legitimate hypercar territory, competing with machines costing 3 times as much. 50 units were originally planned, honoring both 50th anniversaries. Production began, then complications arose. Each car required hundreds of hours of hand fabrication. Customization requests from buyers added complexity. Meeting various safety and emissions regulations for different markets created challenges. By the time production ended, only 19 were completed. Just 2 were sold outside Japan, making them nearly impossible to encounter in the United States or Europe. Each one cost over $1 million. Each buyer could customize nearly every detail: paint colors, interior materials, wheel finishes. No 2 GTR50s are identical, making them even more special to collectors who value uniqueness above all else. And somehow, despite everything, this still isn't number 1 on the list. Number 2, the HKS Zero-R. At first glance, it looks like aggression incarnated into physical form. Advanced aerodynamics that suggest wind tunnel development. Aggressive styling that makes other GTRs look tame by comparison. Wide body fenders that house massive wheels. A rear wing that could generate legitimate downforce. Every visual element suggests this car was built for one purpose, going absurdly fast. But the real insanity lives under the hood, where HKS engineers performed what can only be described as mechanical surgery. They took the legendary RB26, already one of the most over-engineered engines ever produced, and bored it out to 2.8 liters. More displacement, more air, more fuel, more everything. Then they reinforced it with high-performance internal components designed to withstand abuse that no stock engine would survive. Forged pistons, upgraded connecting rods, enhanced crankshaft, improved head gasket, better oil pump, larger turbochargers. The modifications were extensive and expensive, each component chosen specifically to handle the power HKS was targeting. Final output: 591 horsepower and 398 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 2 seconds, a figure that sounds impossible for a car based on 1990s technology. Top speed exceeding 200 miles per hour. This was one of the fastest production-based cars of its era, competing with purpose-built supercars while retaining GTR DNA. Demand was overwhelming. Orders flooded in from collectors and enthusiasts who understood they were witnessing something special. HKS had created the ultimate expression of what an RB26 could become. Then reality hit. Development costs exceeded HKS's budget by margins that made the project financially unsustainable. Profit margins evaporated. The company made the difficult decision to halt the project. 10 units were planned. Only 4 were completed before production stopped permanently. 3 examples stayed in Japan, hidden in private collections. 1 went to the Sultan of Brunei, whose legendary car collection includes some of the rarest vehicles ever built. 4 cars, that's it. 4 Zero-Rs exist on planet Earth. You'll never see one at a car show, you'll never drive one, you'll probably never even see photographs of the ones that still exist. And yet, somehow, against all logic, this still isn't the rarest GTR ever made. Number 1, the R33 GTR LM road car. Remember back at number 15 when we talked about the R33 LM Limited? Remember how we said the R33 is the ugly duckling of the GTR lineage? The forgotten generation sandwiched between the legendary R32 that dominated Group A racing and the iconic R34 that became a cultural phenomenon through video games and movies. The R33 that enthusiasts overlook, collectors ignore, and magazines rarely feature. Here's the plot twist that redefines everything you thought you knew about GTR rarity. The rarest Skyline GTR ever built belongs to this generation. Not the R32, not the R34, not the R35, the R33. 1995, Nissan needed a car to compete in GT1 endurance racing, the premier category where manufacturers proved their engineering capabilities against the world's best. They built the R33 GTR LM specifically for this purpose. Unique wide-body kit that increased track width for better stability. Raised forged wheels chosen for their strength-to-weight ratio. Interior nearly identical to the standard R33, aside from a Nismo steering wheel and Alcantara racing seats with checkered center inserts. The race version produced 400 horsepower and competed at Le Mans, where it proved the R33 platform was capable of fighting with purpose-built racing machines. But this isn't about the race cars. Multiple race versions were built. Teams campaigned them. They served their purpose. This is about something else entirely, something almost nobody knows exists. Nissan built one road-legal version, singular. One car, a homologation special that technically met the requirements for street registration but was never intended to be driven on public roads. They detuned the RB26 to 300 horsepower to make it theoretically street compliant, though compliant is a generous term for a car that shares components with a Le Mans racer. It exists right now, preserved at Nissan's Zama Heritage Collection in Japan, where the company stores its most significant historical vehicles. You can't buy it. Nissan will never sell it. You can't drive it. Insurance alone would be impossible. You can't even touch it. The car sits behind barriers, protected by security, accessible only to Nissan personnel and occasionally special guests who receive private tours.